So there's this old adage amongst nerdy classicists. It goes, you have to go down to come up. Is that something that we get from Dante? Is that a Dante theme?
Well, when you say come from Dante, I think maybe as an Old Testament scholar, I think, it says right in the Bible, humble yourself in the sight of the Lord and he will lift you up. So I don't think Dante just invented it, but I think you're right in the sense that the structure of Dante's comedy actually involves first going down all the way to the bottom of the pit of hell of the Inferno before he can rise up on first Mount Purgatory and then finally to ascend the heavens in paradise. So yes, I think certainly that is the basic structure of Dante, and it's not simply the physical structure, but it has significance.
Right, there's a spiritual meaning that's sort of behind that, because the first scene that we see Dante in is he's actually at the base of a mountain and he's trying to ascend it and he can't. And then his teacher Virgil comes to him and says, you can't go this way. You have to go down to as you said, to the very pit of hell. And then you're not gonna sort of get to the pit of hell and then come back up again. You're actually gonna go up the other side, to the other side of the earth. So essentially keep going down, but it's going to turn out that you've been going the same direction all along.
It's good to remind people like that they didn't just realize that the world was round in Columbus's time, but Dante writing 200 years before already knew that to go once you get to the center of the earth, you can come out the other side. And in fact, he comes out what would probably be for us, somewhere in the South Pacific where there's Mount Purgatory, and that's where he does most of his climbing.
Right.
Yeah, and it's the climb of Mount Purgatory that's most fascinating to me. So one of the moments that really sticks out in my mind is the moment when Virgil explains to Dante how purgatory is structured. So it's structured, there's the 7 deadly sins, but all those sins are different, and they have to do with the way our loves are organized. So if you're lower on the mountain, you're loving the wrong kind of thing. You're loving evil. If you're in the middle of the mountain, you don't love enough. If you're higher up, you love too much.
Right.
And so it's fascinating to see Dante go through this process in which his loves are ordered.
Right.
He loves some of the wrong things. He's prideful. He takes pride in his poetry, and so he has to learn to take less pride in his poetry. And as he goes up, he has to be purified by the flames of lust. So it's fascinating to see the way that his loves are corrected and pointed toward the true good, towards God, as he scales Mount Purgatory.
One thing that makes maybe we should back up and say is just like, well, purgatory. What are we talking about here? And obviously we're talking about belief before the Reformation, when Luther brought up from the beginning, like the question of purgatory. And so there is, on the literal level, like he is actually going on a tour through the afterlife, and in medieval Christian thought, that included going through Mount Purgatory. Or not Mount Purgatory, but going through Purgatory, which he's portrayed as like you say, a 7-tiered, 7-corniced, 7-level mountain. As someone that has my questions about the medieval doctrine.
Our students do too. That's one of the first reactions.
Of purgatory. One of the things that I find is it's helpful for me to think about, even though he's actually portraying people, after their life in purgatory, the very things that they're doing there, and the process that you're talking about reorienting your love, is something that I hope that we're all doing right now in our Christian life.
Yeah, you were talking about that earlier as a sort of so everyone who's in purgatory is already saved, right? They're not earning their salvation or anything like that. What they're doing is they're trying to live their salvation, or trying to order their loves rightly. So when you say love too much, well, it's not that, there's a limit for how much we should love. It's that they're loving small things in the way they should be loving large things, right? Or so the base is pride, right? Where they're loving themselves too greatly. And Dante, as he's going through, everyone is crouching down with boulders on their heads, looking at images of humility. And he says, as he leaves that level, you know, I straightened up physically, but my body or my spirit sort of stayed bent low. I achieved this right look at myself by spending time in this sort of spiritual exercise gym that is purgatory.
Yeah, and that's really the process of sanctification, of growing more like Christ. And I mean, that's how I think of it. It's just an extended metaphor for sanctification.
Yeah.
But I think Dante gives us some deep insight into how that process works in our own souls.
One of my favorite things about that is that you can only move while the sun is up. So the sun is this sort of metaphor for God and for God's presence, right? And the only way to move up Mount Purgatory is with grace, is with the Lord sort of blessing you and helping you in that journey. So it takes away that mistake of saying like, oh, I got to pull up my own bootstraps and get myself up the mountain. It's there's only through grace are they able to ascend.
So they're climbing, and so there's that image of grace through the sunlight. But there's so many, like purgatory itself is a grace, the way that it's all set up
Right.
to achieve the sanctification process. And there's lessons to be learned. There are angels that help along the way, and then there's the community of the saints, the church, that are working together. They're all climbing together, and so that is the way that so often in our own lives we receive grace. The sanctifying grace that helps us to become the right people is through fellowship with people in the church.
And it can become easier as you go. Dante experiences that. He feels lighter. It's easier for him to ascend. I think that's the way it is with our battles with sin. Like at first it might be really tough going, but kind of as you get used to fightings and reorienting your loves, the process becomes easier. Kind of like when you're pushing a car when your car is stalled. At first it's really hard to get it moving, but once you get some momentum, the process speeds up.
Yeah, and you come even to the point where when he's in paradise, he's literally flying from level to level in the celestial realms. Yeah, where he's elevated by that grace.
Yeah. And yet, I mean, so that's one of the things I think he's doing there is encouraging us to say, just because it seems so hard, it's not always going to be this hard. But the whole idea of 7 levels as well is like, well, you might experience some real gains and success and some actual sanctification in these levels, but there are still plenty of others, as we go through life to confront.
The Torrey Honors Institute at Biola University. Biblically centered, great books, liberal education. More at biola.edu/Torrey.